I'll probably work on something not as taxing and a bit closer to my comfort zone this month.
Well, that was a complete lie. Hey peeps, it's Dems, and this is Synthetic Girlfriend, a game where you solve puzzles and date cute robot girls and a cyborg. May is about to end, so it's time for another devlog as usual. Alright, I want to talk about 3 things in this devlog, so let's get started with point number 1. The reality is that I took 2 weeks off because I was really burnt out from the previous month. I've mentioned that I was burnt out in the previous video, but I chose to keep moving forward so I could get all those 3D models into the game, which was my goal at the time. I think it's the hardest I've worked so far, and I'm proud of the progress I made, so if you haven't seen it, go check it out. I promise it's cool and funny and interesting. It will also make me very happy. I'll put a link on the top right. So, going back to me taking a break. What did I do during those 2 weeks of time off? Well, basically nothing but partying and playing video games. It felt really good, honestly. Not that I haven't been partying or playing video games before, but making progress for the devlogs was always on the back of my head. I wonder if this is part of the YouTube content creator thing too. The pressure, you know? This time, however, as I did research on how to make the calendar system work and still having those feelings of burnout, my brain was like, hey, maybe it's time to rest, right? Like, really rest and not think about the game at all. And I couldn't agree more with the little bastard. So for the first 2 weeks of May, I did absolutely no work on the game. I haven't even thought about the game at all. All I wanted to focus on was resting. Resting is part of the process too, I believe, and it's important to take care of yourself. And basically I've been working almost every day on the game, so I really need it. Now, this might seem unprofessional, right? Telling you all that I didn't do any work on the game. I'm probably coming off as a lazy ass, but I would rather tell you the truth than not being honest with you guys. I always want to be transparent while making this game. That's the reason why I always put the tutorials I follow on screen and show all the issues I stumble upon while developing the game. I wanna show you that a dork like me can make a game like this with all the struggles and burnout and despair and hopelessness, and with the knowledge that all of this won't matter at all in the end because we are all trapped in a vortex of meaningless for the rest of our lives until the very day we depart from this virtual reality. I've said on the very first devlog that my plan is to put 1 video out a month, no matter how much progress I made, so if I haven't done any work, I'll talk about it too. It just makes sense, right? That being said, I have done some work because you are watching some new footage of me fiddling around in Blender and Sprite and so on. So, what's the deal with that? Well, that's point number 2. So the calendar system is not ready yet. In fact, I haven't even done any coding for it whatsoever. I'm still pondering on how to properly implement it. I'm in that state of analysis paralysis, which for those who don't know, it's just a fancy name for overthinking things and not doing any real work out of fear of fucking up. Also, I couldn't find any proper tutorials on how to make the thing I need for the game this time, so I will have to resort to something I don't usually do. I will have to think, like, put some actual thought into it, like, use the brain, you know? And since I didn't want to do that for this month, I just opened up Blender and Sprite and started modeling and texturing. I know I said I wouldn't be touching Blender for a month, but well, I kinda miss it, but not really. I don't know, I just have a love-hate relationship with Blender, okay? But since I had some unfinished business here and it's easy enough for me to create content for the devlogs using Blender and Sprite, I figured this is what I will be doing this month. Which brings me to point number 3. What work did I actually do this month? I wanted to standardize the UV maps of the characters for a while now. Some of the geometry like the hands and the back were still not properly done or made square on the UVs, so that's what I focused on first. I know you guys are probably sick of seeing this Mika model, except for the die-hard Mika fans out there. But since she's the first character I model and the one I'm probably basing the structure of the UVs and armature off for the rest of the characters, I think that doing a good job with her to set up a nice foundation is gonna save me a lot of trouble later down the line. If I nail down the final shape of the UVs now, it will be way easier to do something similar for the rest of the characters later. That being said, I know some characters will have different hair or accessories that will probably need to have their UVs tweaked individually, but still. Next, I had some fun doing pixel art for the different eye expressions. and I set them up on Blender to do some tests using one of the observatory's tutorials. Links in the description. So having the eye expressions as shape keys and all that fun stuff in Blender was fine and all, but I had to find some way to put those into Unity so I could give some more life to the characters. I tried integrating these different eye expressions into Unity at first using a method that I didn't properly understand completely, to be honest. I thought that changing the way the eye's texture was structured would help me, but after trying setting it up as a vertical strip and then as a horizontal strip, I couldn't get it working. I kept blindly following this tutorial and I didn't get anywhere. This was a Sunday night, by the way, so my mind was probably somewhere else and I was a little bit tired. So I did some more research and read the documentation a bit before looking for another tutorial. I found this one by About Game Making and it looked fairly simple and a bit more intuitive, so I decided to follow along. I think at some point I screwed up the whole texture, so I set it back up the way it was, a 2x4 grid of eye expressions. And after some bit of tinkering, it was done, although I couldn't get it to play. So it was time to do some more research on how to stack and play animations. After all, I'll have to stack several animations on these characters if I want them, for example, to display a talking animation while making a specific expression with their eyes and also doing a gesture with their hands. Or that's what I was thinking. I quickly realized that this would not be convenient, since I'll probably have to manually set all those animations for each character, and that's definitely not a good way to go about this. A better way of doing this would be to have everything standardized and have generic animations, either via code or some other way. So I did some more research in that department, and Unity has a feature called animation retargeting, which lets me use the same animation for different characters. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with animating the eyes. This is for actual 3D animations as far as I can tell, and not something like texture animations. But I thought it was still useful, so I got to work on that right away. I still wanted to have those eye expressions done, but I decided to take care of that later down the line. So, going back to animation retargeting. I looked around here on YouTube and I started to follow a tutorial when it suddenly arrived at the rig section of the model inspector and everything was wrong on my end. I tried setting up the rig inside Unity, but it wasn't working. Apparently it has to do with the way the rig is set up in Blender. Unity kept telling me that the hierarchy was all wrong, so I had to do some more research on how to properly manage this. I mean, it was properly rigged in Blender, but I guess Unity has its own set of rules. So after doing some more research, I landed on CGDive's channel again. This time I watched this video where he explains how to set up two rigs for the character mesh, a control rig and a game rig. This was the key to make it work with Unity, because I could have the control rig with all the fancy inverse kinematics and constraints I set up in devlog number 3, but then I could have a game rig that could actually be exported into Unity with all the proper bound hierarchy. Having two rigs was weird at first, but in retrospect it made a lot more sense, and I could see how this would help a newbie like me. After setting everything up, which took a really long time and a lot of learning, I finally sat down and made two really simple animations to see if I could play them on command via the dialogue script, but I encountered this issue with Mika's shoulders. I tried to figure out what was wrong, but I couldn't. Her left arm bone was simply staying in place for some reason. At this point I was really tired, so I thought, whatever, I'll deal with it later. I finished making these really crappy test animations and exported the model as an FBX so I could get it into Unity. However, it seems the bullshit doesn't end here. For some reason the thumbs up animation didn't get into Unity, and the slouching animation was working correctly all of a sudden. I got into the humanoid rig settings in Unity and some bones were not even properly set up either. But I thought I did everything correctly, and it was definitely working before. Then why when I tried to change something in the rig settings, it just wouldn't let me? At this point I just got really mad and I was thinking of calling it a day. However, I took a break and came back after a while, and after a ton of fiddling around, I could get it working again. After that, I finally called it a day. I spent the next day doing another couple of test animations. I even had to redo some of them. The shoulder issue I had the day before was nowhere to be seen either. So I wonder what happened there. Guess I'll never know. Anyway, I thought I was sad, but for some reason, some of the animations couldn't be exported properly and didn't get into Unity. I'll never stop running into issues with this 3D animation thing, will I? I'm beginning to understand why there's a whole crew dedicated to this field in AAA games. Oh well, I'll just have to suck it up for now. After I set everything up in Unity, I went back to Yuri's model and applied the same treatment I did to Mika's model. I also cleaned up his model a bit. It was time to finally test this animation retargeting thing. And there we go. The two characters are playing the same animation now. I know it's not impressive, but from a technical standpoint, this is going to be super useful in the future once I have a library of different animations for the 3D models. I could even look into using animations that other people made to make my work a bit easier. I now have standardized the UV maps and rigs, which means adding more characters from now on is going to boil down to making new models and painting over textures I already have. So now that I got that working, it was time to add some code to the dialogue system so I could call the animations via the dialogue script using the tag systems discussed in devlog number 2. Which, if you haven't watched, by the way, I'll leave a link to it in the top right corner. I already have some ancient code written for this, from back when I first started the project, so I knew this was possible. I just needed to tread this road all the way up to here. So what I did was basically make transitions from the idle animation into the talk 1 animation and back. I set up a trigger in the animator that would, well, trigger the animation whenever it's called from the code. Then I went into the character class and used this setTrigger function and passed in the value of the trigger. This value comes from the dialog manager script, specifically from the animateCharacter function, which takes a string from the actual dialog script made in Ink and passes it down to the target character. Then I'll just have to open up Ink and using the tag system, I'll target the character I want and do this code, and the characters play the animation I need during their conversation. Great. Alright, so I got the characters idling and doing some really weird hand thingy over there. Yeah, I'm not a 3D animator. However, they are still lacking something. I have this isTalking variable on my code, which again is from that ancient code I wrote years ago, and I figure I should finally put it to use. Now, remember what I said about stacking animations a couple of minutes ago? It was time for that. You see, when you set up the humanoid rig in Unity, you'll notice that it's divided into parts. Well, you can take these parts and mask some of them out to have the 3D character play two different animations simultaneously. This is called animation layering, and is usually used for things like running and firing a weapon at the same time, for example. In my case, I want my characters to display a talking animation and leave the rest of the body free to play whatever weird hand thingy animation. However, as much as I wanted to get this feature into this devlog, I'm running out of time for this month, so it will have to wait until the next devlog. I also wanted to finally make some models for Ayla and Eri, but they will also have to wait until next month. So yeah, I guess this is it for now. I'll put a link to part 2 once that one is available. And if you're from the future, feel free to go watch that one right now. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you found any of these to your liking or if you think it's interesting. Alright, until next time, adios!